One September morning in 2005, in Oregon's Willamette National Forest, where pines tower toward the sky and morning mists hang like a silent blanket, a hunter entered the woods near the Fall Creek Trail. He was looking for nothing but deer. But what he found shocked the entire Lane County Sheriff's Office. In the middle of the woods, where there was no cell service, nearly 30 miles from any major road, was a deserted, silent campsite. Inside the tent, a woman's body lay motionless, her blood already drying. A few feet away, a man's body lay slumped against a pickup truck, shot several times. Next to it lay the body of a Weimaraner, curled up, also shot to death. There was no sign of a struggle, no one called for help. No one knew what had happened in the days before. The campsite was completely isolated from the world. The victims were quickly identified: Jason Allen, 26, and Alexandra Sasha Benet, 22, a young couple from Eugene, Oregon. They had gone to the Willamette Forest together to escape the city, enjoy nature, and practice for a long hiking trip. But instead of returning with smiles, they were left with empty bullet casings and a chilling question: who shot them in the middle of the woods, and for what reason? The case immediately caused panic across the United States because of its brutality, randomness, and incomprehensibility. In the middle of a deserted, peaceful forest. No one expected an execution, no witnesses, no trace of escape. No one saw anything except the gunshots at night and the silence that followed. Police, the press, and the public raised a series of theories: robbery, sexual assault, a fight between campers, or worse, a cold-blooded hunter choosing the forest as a test kill. The answer remained hidden in the darkness of the jungle until more than a decade later, when a small trace of DNA revealed the whole horrifying truth. Jason Allen and Alexandra Sasha Benet are not the type of people who are easily constrained by urban life. In an age of social media, townhouses, cars, and fixed working hours, they have chosen a different lifestyle: minimalist, free, and connected to nature. They met in early 2003 in an art class in Eugene, Oregon, a college town famous for its free spirit and outdoor activities. Jason was an ecology student at the time, loved exploring, climbing, and spent most of his free time reading books about the environment. Sasha was a literature major, but always dreamed of a life in harmony with nature, away from the stuffy city. Their love began with a discussion about Jack London and Henry David Thoreau, writers who loved the woods and loved solitude. Soon they moved into a small house on the outskirts of town, got a Weimaraner named Ranger, and began living as voluntary minimalists. Friends remember them as a couple who didn't need much, just the woods, a truck, and each other. Jason was tall, gentle, quiet, but thoughtful. He had a knack for remembering the names of all the wild plants and once told a friend, "I don't need fame. I just want to travel across America with Sasha, with Ranger, and find a place that's safe enough to never leave again." Sasha was the opposite: lively, smiling, wildly artistic. She loved film photography, collected strange rocks along the way, and kept a diary. In her notebook, underlined twice, was a sentence: "We're learning to live authentically, day by day, in the wild without judgment." Neither of them were survivalists, but they were experienced and cautious. They always carried dry food, a first aid kit, a GPS, and knew how to set up camp safely. The trip to the Willamette National Forest, in September 2005, was planned a month in advance. They told their loved ones they would be camping for about a week, with no cell phone reception, but everything was safe, don't worry. That was the last time the family heard from them. It's impossible to talk about Jason and Sasha without mentioning Ranger, the ash-gray Weimaraner they raised from a puppy. Ranger accompanied them everywhere, from the snowy mountains to the California beaches. He was loyal, intelligent, could sniff out food, bark warnings, and guard the camp at night. The death of Ranger, who was also shot and killed next to the camp, deeply moved the investigator. An old cop said, "When a killer doesn't spare a dog, he's got no humanity left." Jason, Sasha, and Ranger, 3 creatures in the wild, never returned. They disappeared in silence. No phone calls, no distress signals, just dried blood on the forest floor, a silent camp, and the lifeless eyes of those who found them. And from then on, the peace of Willamette was no longer intact. In September 2005, Oregon's Willamette National Forest was an autumn wonderland. The leaves were starting to change color. The air was crisp and cool, but pleasant enough for an adventurous hiker. It was the perfect season for couples like Jason and Sasha, not too crowded, not too cold, and the woods were alive. They chose an area off the beaten path, a few miles off the main trail, next to a small stream that ran through the forest. It was almost completely cut off from the world. No Wi-Fi, no cell phone signal, no passers-by, no ranger station nearby. But for them, that was freedom. They set up camp among the tall old pines. The pickup truck was parked next to the campsite, with a clothesline, a tent, a camp stove, and their usual camping gear. Sasha wrote in her diary, "The Willamette Forest is breathing. We don't see anyone. Ranger is sleeping soundly. Jason just made chicken soup on the gas stove. Nothing more is needed here." That was written on September 14, 2005. That was probably Sasha's last day alive. On September 17, a hunter named Stephen Lyles was walking through the Fall Creek Trail area when he saw something strange, a truck parked on the side of the trail, no one in it, no movement. He walked around the tent, calling out but no one answered. And then, he found Jason's body lying next to the tent, slumped over as if trying to run to the truck. Inside the tent, Sasha lay motionless, shot in the head and chest. Next to the tent was Ranger's body, shot in the stomach. Stephen jumped up, ran back out of the woods, and drove straight to the nearest police station. The call came in at 5:32 p.m. that afternoon. When police arrived, they quickly cordoned off the area. What they found was deeply disturbing. There was no sign of a struggle, there was no evidence of any stolen property, there was no sign of a search of the tent. Both victims had been shot at close range, precisely, decisively. What was especially chilling was this: not a single gunshot had been heard in the previous 3 nights. No one had reported it. No strange lights had been seen. No cars had been seen moving. The area was so remote that if anyone had screamed or fired a shot, no one would have heard it. The killer had come and gone in complete silence. News of the case quickly spread throughout Oregon. The next day's headlines in the local paper read, "Willamette, a favorite of campers, hikers, and young families, has become a symbol of unsafety." No one understood. Was this a robbery? Was it a personal conflict? Was it a madman, or a cold-blooded killer who preyed on people in the woods? The serenity of nature had now become the perfect mask for crime, and the scariest thing was, the police had no leads to follow. The Lane County Sheriff, upon arriving at the scene, described, "We've never seen a murder in the middle of nowhere that seemed so calm. No panic. No struggle. Just well-placed shots, and then silence." The scene spoke volumes. Jason was shot twice, once in the back, once in the back of the head, as if he had turned to run or had no time to react. Sasha was shot in the chest while lying down, possibly resting in the tent, unaware of what was happening outside. The dog, Ranger, was shot once, also at close range. It may have barked, attacked, or simply been a witness to be killed. There were no guns at the scene. No shell casings. No distinctive shoe prints. The killer had been well prepared, and left cleanly. the medical examiner determined the bullet was a 9mm, fired from a semi-automatic. The bullet wound was straight, close, and deadly. The killer was experienced with guns, firing quickly, without hesitation. There were no secondary wounds or resistance. The victim barely had time to realize what was happening. Jason had swelling on his knee and shin, indicating that he had been kneeling or falling to the ground when he was shot, possibly ducking out of the tent when he was attacked from behind. All that was left were 3 bodies, 2 humans, 1 dog, and the darkness of the Willamette jungle. The crime occurred without a clue as to motive. Questions immediately arose: robbery? No property missing? Sexual assault? No signs of abuse? Psychopath? So why the most remote, farthest, deepest camp? Personal conflict. Neither victim had any enemies, so what was the reason? The police were forced to think of a more terrifying hypothesis. Did the killer just want to kill? That's it? A killing without reason. No warning. No grudge. An anonymous person in the woods, choosing the perfect moment, killing, and disappearing as if they had never existed. Dozens of investigators swept the surrounding area, looking for bullet casings, tire tracks, other tents, strange footprints, analyzing phones, diaries, traffic cameras, interviewing people camping nearby. Results: nothing, no DNA. No witnesses. No electronic recording devices. A case in the woods, perfect, without a trace. And then, time began to do its worst, gather dust on the file. In 2006, the case still had not progressed. In 2008, the file was softly closed, only a small group was left to follow up. By 2010, investigators began to think they would never catch the killers of Jason, Sasha, and Ranger. But they were wrong. In September 2005, after establishing the crime scene in the Willamette National Forest, police and forensic technicians began to collect every scrap of evidence that remained. The initial results of the investigation, as it turned out, were extremely vague. No shell casings, which the killer had collected. No witnesses. No one knew who had been near the campsite that night. The only thing that seemed to have survived the killer's thorough cleanup was a small piece of material stuck to Jason Allen's jacket. The piece, initially thought to be dust or dog hair, was stored with the evidence but not tested in depth due to the limited DNA technology available in 2005. The case was closed softly, and the case was classified as unsolved, waiting for time or luck. In 2018, the Oregon Department of Justice reopened a series of unsolved murder cases, working with the FBI and more modern DNA analysis technology, including STR sequencing, genealogical DNA. First used successfully in the Golden State Killer case, a young forensic expert, Megan Porter, was assigned to review the Willamette 2005 file. When she saw a note about a small object stuck to the jacket, she suggested retesting using modern techniques. The results left the entire investigation team speechless. An unidentified male DNA sample, a 99.999% match to a person in the Open GEDmatch database. Through genealogy and tracing back to relatives with similar DNA, the FBI determined the most likely match was Kenneth Lee Hicks, born in 1953, living in Oak Ridge, Oregon, less than 15 miles from the crime scene. He was a carpenter, lived alone, and legally owned a gun. He had no outstanding criminal record, no record of violence, but had been arrested for stalking women walking in the woods in 1988. The most suspicious thing: in 2005, the time the crime occurred, Hicks was unemployed, lived just a few miles from the campsite, and often wandered in the woods. No one paid attention to a middle-aged man riding a pickup truck, carrying a gun, because that was normal in the Oregon wilderness. In 2020, the police obtained a search warrant for Kenneth Hicks's home. In his dilapidated garage, they found an old canvas bag hidden behind a wooden shelf, containing an older 9mm handgun, the same type of ammunition as the victim's wound, several photos of women camping, taken from a distance, including one of Sasha Benet, taken a few days before she was killed. When questioned, Hicks denied any wrongdoing. He said, "I've never been to Willamette. I don't know who they are." But the evidence didn't lie. The DNA match. The gun matched. The proximity of the house to the crime scene. The suspicious behavior in the past. And most importantly, no one else was there. On August 3, 2021, Kenneth Lee Hicks was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Jason, Sasha, and Ranger. The case, once considered unsolvable, finally had an answer. Kenneth Lee Hicks, born in 1953, was a man no one paid much attention to, and that was why he was able to remain hidden for nearly 16 years after the crime. No serious criminal record. No significant social connections. No family. No one close enough to suspect him. Hicks lived in Oak Ridge, a quiet little town bordering the Willamette National Forest. Neighbors described him as a loner, a hunter, a nobody. Always wore his hat down and didn't look people in the eye. They didn't think he was dangerous. Just a freak, a man of the woods. No one knew that because no one was paying attention, Hicks had taken it upon himself to do anything, even kill. When police reviewed Hicks's past, they found chilling details. 1988, Hicks was warned by police for stalking a group of women camping near Mackenzie River. There was insufficient evidence to charge him, so he was released. 1995, caught spying on a family campsite with binoculars, saying he was curious about the way they set up camp. 2002, a woman reported to a park ranger that someone had taken photos of her while she was changing in her tent. No arrests were made, but the description matched Hicks's. None of these incidents warranted criminal charges. But they all painted a picture of a solitary, forest-dwelling man who made nature his domain, and who gradually saw other people as objects to observe and possibly kill. According to a court-appointed forensic psychologist at his 2022 trial, Hicks did not have a serious mental illness, did not have hallucinations, delusions, or loss of control, but had borderline personality disorder combined with a quiet antisocial streak. He didn't kill out of hatred. Not out of revenge. Not out of fanaticism. He killed because he could. Because they were there. And he didn't want them there. When asked why he killed the dog, Hicks gave a single, monotone answer: it barked. At his pre-trial hearing, Hicks appeared with gray hair, an orange prison jumpsuit, and a blank expression. No remorse. No reaction. You didn't see a monster, just an old man like any other person walking down the street. And that's what makes the case all the more chilling. Evil doesn't always have a fierce face. It can be very quiet. Very close. And very often, from the moment he was arrested until the day he was sentenced, Kenneth Hicks did not confess, did not explain, did not apologize. He kept his right to remain silent, as he had for 15 years after pulling the trigger. That's why, to this day, the true motive for the murders remains a void. A black hole. An uncertain mystery. Did Hicks see them as intruders, or simply, did he want to experience the feeling of killing? Whatever the answer, Jason, Sasha, and Ranger, creatures who loved the forest, loved freedom, lost their lives simply because their existence was not acceptable to a gun-toting, emotionless man. On May 15, 2022, nearly 17 years after the shocking murder in the Willamette National Forest, Kenneth Lee Hicks was officially brought to trial in the Lane County, Oregon, courtroom. The courtroom was packed with press, members of the public, and the victim's family. Behind the front row, Sasha's mother, Margaret Benet, sat clutching her eldest daughter's hand. Her hair was gray. She had been waiting for this trial since 2005, since Jason's pickup truck was found in the woods and her daughter's body was brought back in a black plastic bag. The prosecutor read the charges in a firm voice: 2 counts of first-degree murder against Jason Allen and Sasha Benet, 1 count of cruelty to and murder of an owned animal. For the death of Ranger, 1 count of illegal possession of a firearm, the unregistered gun found at Hicks's home. The evidence presented: Hicks's DNA found on the victim's shirt, Hicks's own furtive photographs of Sasha taken days before the murder, a gun that matched the fatal bullet, a history of stalking the woods for 3 decades. The prosecutor concluded, Kenneth Hicks didn't just kill. He waited, in the darkness of the jungle, and when he had the chance, he struck, then retreated into silence. That silence lasted 16 years, but today, justice finally rang out. Kenneth Hicks, when asked if he had anything to say, simply shook his head. No confession, no denial, no defense. He looked straight at the judge, then at the ceiling. No glance at the victim's family. No tears. No anger. Just emptiness, which was more terrifying than any threat. When asked to speak, Sasha's mother stood up. She said, I've imagined Jason and Sasha dying so many times. In the tent, scared, not knowing what was happening. I begged for an apology, for a reason. Now I don't need it. I just want to know that he's never going to get out of this prison. Jason's father, a former soldier, stood next to her. He didn't say much. He just pulled a photo of his son from his pocket, a smiling young man with Sasha and Ranger, and held it up to the court. Without a word, that photo said more than any argument. The judge said, the defendant committed the crime with the utmost cruelty, the most cold-blooded, and prolonged the pain of the victim's family for nearly 2 decades. Therefore, the court sentences him, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for the 2 murders, 5 additional years for the murder of an owned animal, and the maximum administrative penalty for the illegal possession of a weapon. Kenneth Hicks was escorted out of the courtroom in silence, no boos. No farewells, just justice, late, but complete. The 2005 murders in the Willamette National Forest were more than just a crime. They were a rift in the collective psyche of those who believed that nature was the safest, most peaceful place to live, to love, to escape the chaos of society. Jason, Sasha, and Ranger didn't just die from a bullet. They died from a betrayed belief that deep in the woods, far from humans, there would be no evil. After the case was reinvestigated and solved, many organizations related to outdoor travel, tourism, and survival in the U.S. completely changed their safety recommendations, increased advocacy for sharing GPS coordinates and itineraries with loved ones before entering the woods, encouraged carrying an emergency locator, satellite messenger, warned about dangers not only from nature, but also from other people in the woods. The U.S. Forest Service has also begun to improve its monitoring system in national parks, with security cameras that don't intrude on nature but help control the frequency of human presence in remote campsites. The death of Ranger, a loyal dog who was innocent of any crime, just because he was present at the scene, has outraged the animal-loving community. In 2023, the state of Oregon passed a law informally known as Ranger's Law, which states, the intentional killing of an owned animal in the context of criminal violence will be a separate crime, with a maximum sentence of up to 10 additional years in prison. This is a historic step, not just for the dog, but because it affirms the value of life, whether human or animal. Jason and Sasha's family, after many years of not daring to return to the forest, held a private memorial in the area where they died. They erected a simple stone marker. Engraved with the words, "They loved this forest, and they gave it everything, in silence, in beauty, they now live among the trees." A photo of Jason, Sasha and Ranger, three simple but free creatures, was printed as a poster in the Wilderness with Caution campaign, helping to educate young people about approaching the forest. The Willamette 2005 case is now taught in classrooms about criminal psychology as an example of a motivated predator. Forensic science, emphasizing the value of preserving evidence long-term, journalistic ethics, how to report on unsolved crimes without causing panic, it became a double symbol, a testament to the real fear that can come from anywhere. And the triumph of justice over seemingly untouchable darkness. After the trial, a journalist asked Sasha's mother, "Do you think you will ever forgive him?" She replied, without hesitation, "I don't need to forgive. I just want my child not to be forgotten." Jason Allen and Sasha Benet were not people bound by the rhythm of everyday life. They chose to live differently. They chose the forest, nature, freedom, simplicity, and most importantly, each other. They died not because of carelessness, not because of mistakes, and certainly not because they actively put themselves in danger. They died because of evil that needed no reason, an evil that was silent, emotionless, and silent, an evil that simply existed, hiding in the form of a gentle-looking old man who lived near the forest, harming no one, until he harmed everyone. Jason and Sasha once believed that, as long as they loved each other and lived according to their ideals, the world would leave them alone. But the world, especially its wild side, does not operate according to justice, morality, or desire. In nature, there is not always a clear line between beauty and death. Sasha once wrote in her diary, "I believe that places without people are the safest places." That was wrong, not because the forest is dangerous, but because people bring danger into the forest. Willamette National Forest is still there, the trees still grow, the streams still flow, the birds still sing. But since the murders, people no longer see this forest in the same way. It is no longer just a camping place. It has become a symbol of what humans cannot control, both in nature and in the darkness that lies within some human beings. Nature is a refuge for the soul, but if we are not careful, it can also become a final farewell, silent, cold, unwitnessed. The deaths of Jason and Sasha cannot be reversed. But they have left something permanent, a new animal protection law, a community education fund in their names, more modern forensics classes, and families, couples, young people who love the woods will no longer walk into the woods as innocently as before. They will still love nature, but they will love it with caution. When you hear this story, even if you have never been to Oregon, never set foot in the Willamette, never camped in the deep woods, the story of Jason and Sasha is still worth remembering, because they represent the desire to live authentically, to live simply, to live decently. They were killed not for doing anything wrong, but simply for existing in front of the wrong people. And they deserve to be remembered, not for their gruesome deaths, but for how they lived before it happened.